The cantina had grown completely quiet, except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Zixthul sat in silence for several minutes, his four hands wrapped around his empty glass while his crystalline eyes stared into the distance. Felnara waited patiently, sensing that the old commander was gathering himself for something important. "You've heard the stories," Zixthul finally said. "The victories, the impossible achievements, the ways humans consistently defeat superior forces through unconventional thinking. But you haven't heard the truth yet." The reporter leaned forward, her recording device capturing every word. She had expected this interview to cover standard military history, but Zixthul's accounts had revealed something far more complex and disturbing. "The truth is that everything I've told you represents humans fighting with restraints," Zixthul explained. "Like warriors wearing heavy chains, deliberately limiting their own capabilities to meet some internal standard of acceptable conduct." During his years observing human military operations, Zixthul had gradually become aware of references to something called the Geneva Convention. Human commanders frequently consulted thick manuals and legal documents before making tactical decisions. "I thought these were technical specifications," he recalled, "equipment manuals or strategic guidelines that humans use to optimize their effectiveness. I was wrong. They were limitations." The Geneva Convention, Zixthul learned, was a set of rules that humans imposed on themselves during warfare. These rules prohibited certain weapons, protected specific categories of people, and established minimum standards for treating prisoners and civilians. "Admiral Patricia Ross explained it to me during the Kepler campaign," Zixthul said. "She told me that humans had learned to limit their own destructive capabilities because unlimited warfare was too dangerous for their species to survive." Ross was a stern woman with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything around her. She commanded the largest human fleet in the war, but her tactical decisions were constantly influenced by legal and ethical considerations that other species found incomprehensible. "Ross showed me weapons that humans possessed but refused to use," Zixthul explained. "Biological agents that could devastate entire worlds, chemical compounds that would make planets uninhabitable for centuries, nuclear weapons that could crack continents." The Admiral had walked him through a secure facility where these weapons were stored under multiple layers of security. The technology was sophisticated and terrifying, representing centuries of human innovation applied to destruction and death. "She told me that humans had used these weapons in their past," Zixthul recalled. "They had poisoned their own atmosphere, contaminated vast areas of their homeworld, and nearly destroyed their civilization through unrestrained warfare. The lesson had been learned through bitter experience. Humans had discovered that their capacity for violence and destruction exceeded their ability to control the consequences. Their species had survived only by agreeing to impose strict limitations on their own military capabilities, General. Kevin Hayes confirmed this during our conversation about the Titan offensive," Zixthul continued. He explained that human military doctrine was designed around the principle of proportional response and minimal necessary force. Hayes was a broad-shouldered man with dark skin and intelligent eyes who spoke carefully about every aspect of military strategy. His unit had achieved remarkable success against Zephyrian forces, but always within carefully defined parameters. "Hayes told me that humans possessed weapons capable of sterilizing entire star systems," Zixthul said. "Automated machines that could consume planets, transforming matter into additional copies of themselves. Technologies that could manipulate space and time itself. These revelations had initially seemed like boasting or propaganda. No species in the galaxy possessed such capabilities, and the Galactic Council's scientific consensus held that many of them were theoretically impossible. But Hayes showed me the mathematical proofs," Zixthul explained. "The research data, the test results, the prototype devices locked away in secure facilities. Everything was real, functional, and deliberately unused. Human scientists had apparently developed these technologies during periods of desperation in their species' history. Wars that threatened their very existence had driven them to create weapons of unimaginable power. But each victory had come with terrible costs. Hayes described something called mutually assured destruction," Zixthul recalled, "a strategic doctrine where both sides in a conflict possessed enough destructive power to completely annihilate their opponents, making warfare suicidal for everyone involved." This concept had forced humans to develop new approaches to conflict resolution. Instead of relying on superior firepower, they had learned to use psychology, deception, patience, and precise application of force to achieve their objectives. That's why human tactics seem so strange to us, Zixthul realized. They weren't fighting to demonstrate power or achieve dominance. They were fighting to accomplish specific goals with minimal collateral damage. The restraints went beyond choice of weapons. Human military law required protection of civilians, humane treatment of prisoners, preservation of cultural sites, and respect for neutral territories. These obligations significantly complicated their tactical options. Colonel Murphy told me about the rules of engagement that governed human operations, Zixthul said. Detailed protocols that specified when force could be used, what targets were legitimate, how much damage was acceptable to achieve military objectives. Every human commander carried personal responsibility for ensuring their actions complied with these regulations. Violations could result in court-martial, imprisonment, or worse. The legal system was designed to punish excessive violence even when it might have been tactically advantageous. I asked Admiral Ross what would happen if humans removed these restraints. Zixthul said quietly, if they fought without rules, without limitations, without concern for consequences. Ross had been silent for a long time before answering. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that Zixthul had never heard from any other military officer. She told me that unrestrained humans had nearly ended their own species, Zixthul recalled. Multiple times throughout their history, they had come close to extinction through their own capacity for violence and destruction. The Admiral had explained that human warfare without limitations became a form of madness. Their species possessed an instinct for total commitment that could escalate conflicts beyond any rational objective. Once restraints were removed, stopping became nearly impossible. Ross said that humans at full capacity weren't soldiers. Zixthul said, they became something else entirely, something that destroyed everything around them until nothing remained worth fighting for. This revelation had changed Zixthul's understanding of everything he had witnessed during the war. The impossible victories, the unconventional tactics, the precise applications of force, all represented humans operating at a fraction of their actual capabilities. The Galactic Council never fought humanity, Zixthul explained. We fought humans who were trying to be like us, civilized, restrained, operating within acceptable parameters of conduct. The Zephyrian hegemony had made the same mistake. They had assumed that human limitations were weaknesses rather than choices. They had never understood that they were facing an enemy who was deliberately holding back. That's why we could never predict human tactics, Zixthul said. We were trying to understand warriors who were simultaneously fighting two battles, one against us and another against their own nature. The old commander's mandibles clicked rapidly as he considered the implications of his own words. The most terrifying thing about humans isn't their technology or their cunning. It's their restraint. He looked directly at Velnara, his crystalline eyes reflecting the dim light of the cantina. The galaxy should pray that humans never decide we're an existential threat to their species. Because if they ever stop holding back, if they ever remove their self-imposed limitations. Zixthul's voice trailed off as he contemplated scenarios too disturbing to articulate. He had spent years studying human capabilities, learning about their history, understanding their potential. The knowledge had given him nightmares. Admiral Ross told me something else, he said finally. She said that humans had survived as a species because they learned to fear themselves. They understood that their greatest enemy wasn't external threats, but their own capacity for unlimited destruction. The reporter sat in stunned silence, trying to process the implications of what she had heard. The heroic stories of human military achievements suddenly took on a darker aspect when viewed as examples of a species fighting while deliberately handicapped. Why are you telling me this? Velnara asked. Why share these secrets now? Zixthul smiled, but there was no humor in the expression. Because the war is over, and the galaxy still doesn't understand what really happened. We think we know humans because we fought alongside them for 3 years. But we only met the version of humanity that they chose to show us. He stood slowly, his movements careful and deliberate, the scars on his. The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent. 12 different alien species sat in their chairs, waiting. The room was huge, with walls that reached up so high they seemed to touch the stars. Light came from crystals that floated in the air, casting shadows that moved like living things. Commander Zekthon stood in the center of the room. His body was covered in thick armor that looked like the shell of a giant insect. Scars covered every piece of his dark green skin that showed through. His 4 arms hung at his sides, and his large black eyes looked at each council member. The Vorthan had been a soldier for 40 years. He had fought in more battles than he could count. He had seen worlds burn and watched entire armies fall. But today his hands were shaking. "Honored members of the council," Zekthon began. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "You have asked me to speak about the humans. You want to know about their military. You think this will be a simple report about weapons and ships?" He paused and looked around the room. The council members leaned forward in their seats. They had all heard stories about the humans, but most thought they were just tales meant to scare young soldiers. "I am here to tell you that everything you think you know about humans is wrong," Zekthon continued. "They are not like us. They are not like any species in this galaxy. What I will tell you today will change how you see them forever." The council leader, a tall being with blue skin and silver eyes, raised one hand. "Commander, we understand that humans are skilled fighters, but surely you are not suggesting they are beyond our understanding." Zekthon's mandibles clicked together, a sound his species made when they were nervous. "Respected leader, I wish that were true, but I have seen things that still wake me from sleep. I have watched humans do things that should be impossible." He began to pace back and forth, his heavy boots making loud sounds on the metal floor. "My first real battle with humans was at Proxima Station. We had surrounded the place for weeks. Our commanders told us the humans would surrender when they ran out of food. They said humans were weak and would give up easily." The alien council members looked at each other. This was not what they expected to hear. "We were wrong," Zekthon said, stopping his pacing. "So very wrong." He closed his eyes for a moment, remembering. "I was part of the assault team. We broke through their outer defenses and pushed into the station. Everything seemed normal at first. We were winning, just as our commander said we would. Then we reached Corridor 7. His voice became quieter, and the council had to lean forward to hear him. There was one human there, just one. A young male named Jake Morrison. He held that corridor for 6 hours. 6 hours? Asked a council member with tentacles instead of arms. Against how many? 30 of my best soldiers, Zekthon replied. 30 trained Vorthan shock troopers. And this one human stopped us all. The council members began to whisper among themselves. This seemed impossible. At first we thought it would be easy, Zekthon continued. He was just one being against 30. We charged down the corridor, confident we would overwhelm him quickly. Zekthon's eyes grew distant as he remembered. Morrison had built walls from broken metal and debris. He used every piece of the station as a weapon. When we destroyed one barrier, he would fall back and create another. He moved like water, always flowing to where we could not catch him. But that is just good tactics, said another council member. Many species can do this. No, Zekthon said firmly. You do not understand. After 2 hours of fighting, one of my soldiers shot Morrison in the arm. The blast tore his limb almost completely off. Any normal being would have fallen. Any sane being would have surrendered. The room became very quiet. Morrison looked at his ruined arm for maybe 3 seconds. Then he picked up his weapon with his other hand and kept fighting. For 4 more hours, with one arm barely hanging to his body. Zekthon's voice began to shake, but that was not the worst part. The worst part was what he did with his blood. His blood? The council leader's voice was barely a whisper. He used it to mark the walls. Every time we tried to advance, he would smear his blood on the metal to show where we had been. He was using his own life force to track our movements. No computer, no technology, just his blood and his mind. The alien council members sat in shocked silence. None of them had ever heard of such a thing. When our reinforcements finally arrived and we pushed past him, Morrison was still conscious, still fighting. We found him slumped against a wall, covered in his own blood, but his eyes were still watching us. Still planning. Did he survive? Asked a small, furry council member. Yes, Zekthon said. His people came and took him away. But that was when I first understood that humans are different. They do not know when to give up. They do not understand the concept of impossible. He looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at him. This was just my first battle with them. I fought humans for 5 more years after that day. Each battle taught me something new about how terrifying they really are. Terrifying? The council leader seemed confused. Commander, surely you are overstating things. One determined soldier does not make an entire species terrifying. Zekathan laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Honored leader, that is exactly what I thought after Proxima Station. I told myself that Morrison was just unusual, that most humans would not be like him. He paused and looked directly at the council leader. I was wrong again. Morrison was not unusual among humans. He was normal. They are all like that, every single one of them. The room fell silent again. The weight of Zekthan's words settled over the council like a heavy blanket. This is why I am here today, Zekthan said. Not to give you a military report. Not to tell you about their weapons or ships. I am here to warn you about what humans really are. And if you think what I have told you so far is disturbing, then you are not ready for what comes next. He stood straight and looked at each council member in turn. The story of Jake Morrison is just the beginning. What I will tell you next will make you understand why the entire Vorthan Empire fears the sound of human voices. The council chamber was so quiet that the only sound was the soft humming of the floating light crystals. 12 alien civilizations waited to hear more, not knowing that their understanding of the galaxy was about to change forever. Zekthan began walking again, his heavy steps echoing in the silent chamber. The council members watched him carefully, still trying to process what they had heard about the human called Morrison. After Proxima Station, my commanders decided we needed to study human behavior more carefully, Zekthan said. They sent me to observe the siege of Colony 7. It was supposed to be a simple operation. We had 8,000 soldiers surrounding a human settlement with only 200 defenders. He stopped and turned to face the council. The siege lasted 3 months. 3 months against impossible odds. And it was not our victory. A council member with scales instead of skin leaned forward. Surely 8,000 against 200 should have been over quickly. That is what we thought, Zekthan replied. Our generals told us it would take maybe a week. 2 weeks at most. The humans had limited food, limited ammunition, and no chance of rescue. His mandibles clicked nervously. We were wrong about humans again. We are always wrong about humans. The human leader was a female named Captain Lisa Bennett. She was small, even for a human. Maybe half my height and probably weighing less than one of my arms. When I first saw her through our scopes, I thought she looked like a child. Zekthan's eyes became distant as he remembered. Bennett did things that still confuse our military analysts. She turned the entire colony into a weapon. Every building, every piece of metal, every drop of water became part of her defense. On the first day, we attacked from the north. Bennett had somehow moved all the colony's power generators to create an energy barrier. Not a shield like our technology, but actual barriers made from redirected electricity. 50 of my soldiers were killed before we even got close. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. On the second day, we attacked from the east. Bennett had flooded that entire section with a mixture of industrial chemicals that burned through our armor. The ground itself became poisonous to walk on. The third day, we tried from the west. She had rigged the buildings to collapse in a specific pattern, creating a maze that led us directly into prepared kill zones. Zekthan paused and looked at the ceiling. By the end of the first week, we had lost 300 soldiers. The humans had lost maybe 20. But surely they ran out of supplies, asked the tentacled council member. No, Zekthan said simply. They started growing food in the middle of the battle. Bennett had somehow turned the colony's waste systems into hydroponic farms. While we were shooting at them, they were growing vegetables. The council leader looked confused. That seems impossible. Everything about humans seems impossible until you see it, Zekthan replied. But I have not told you the worst part yet. He began pacing again. In the second month, our artillery finally broke through their outer defenses. We managed to wound many of the human defenders. We thought this would finally break their spirit. Instead, it made them more dangerous. Zekthan's voice became quieter. I watched a human named Private Danny Walsh operate heavy weapons for 2 days with holes in his lungs. Medical scans showed that his chest cavity was filling with blood, but he kept firing. Our field medics said he should have been unconscious within minutes, dead within an hour. But Walsh kept fighting for 2 full days. He only stopped when he physically collapsed over his weapon. The small, furry council member made a squeaking sound of distress. How is that possible? We do not know, Zekthan admitted. Our scientists have studied human biology for years now. They say human bodies should not be able to function under such conditions. But humans do it anyway. There was another human, Sergeant Amy Parker. During the final month, our forces managed to collapse part of the colony's underground tunnels. Parker was trapped in a section with 5 other humans and no way out. Zekthon stopped pacing and stood very still. Medical scans showed that Parker had broken her spine in the collapse. She could not feel or move her legs. Any normal being would have waited for rescue or accepted death. Instead, Parker crawled through the ventilation systems for 18 hours. The silence in the chamber was complete. 18 hours, Zekthon repeated, crawling through metal tubes barely wide enough for her body, dragging herself with only her arms, carrying explosive charges. Why would she do such a thing? Whispered the council leader. To save her squad, Zekthon said. Parker placed charges throughout the tunnel system to create a new exit for her trapped teammates. She crawled for 18 hours with a broken spine to save 5 other humans. Did she survive? Yes. When her people pulled her out of the tunnel, she was still conscious. Still giving orders. Still planning the next defense. Zekthon looked around the room at the horrified alien faces. This is what humans are. This is what they do. They simply refuse to stop fighting no matter what happens to their bodies. But Captain Bennett, said a council member. Surely even she had limits. Bennett fought the entire 3 months with a piece of shrapnel lodged near her heart, Zekthon replied. Our scanners detected it in the first week. Any movement could have killed her instantly. She never slowed down. When the siege finally ended, it was not because we defeated the humans. It was because our own forces lost the will to continue. 8,000 soldiers afraid of 200 humans who would not surrender. Zekthon's voice became very quiet. Do you understand what I'm telling you? We did not lose because of superior human technology. We did not lose because they had better weapons. We lost because they have something we do not. What is that? Asked the council leader. They have the ability to ignore reality when it does not suit them, Zekthon said. When their bodies say stop, they keep going. When logic says surrender, they fight harder. When death comes for them, they tell it to wait. He looked directly at each council member. Every species in this galaxy has limits. Every species except humans. They do not seem to understand that some things are impossible, and that makes them the most dangerous beings we have ever encountered. The council chamber remained silent for a long time. Finally, the council leader spoke in a shaky voice. Commander, surely these are extreme examples. Not all humans can be like this. Zekthon's laugh was bitter and cold. Honored leader, that is what I told myself after Colony 7. I convinced myself that Bennett and her people were special, that normal humans would be easier to fight. He turned to look out the great windows at the stars beyond. My next assignment taught me how wrong I was. Every human soldier I have ever faced has this same impossible nature. They are all like Morrison and Bennett and Walsh and Parker. All of them. The question came from multiple council members at once. All of them, Zekthon confirmed. And what I will tell you next will prove it. Because the humans I fought after Colony 7 made Bennett look cautious and reasonable. The alien council members looked at each other with growing fear. If what Zekthon had told them so far was just the beginning, what horrors were yet to come? Zekthon turned away from the windows and faced the council again. His forearms hung at his sides, but his hands were clenched into fists. The scars on his carapace seemed to glow in the crystal light. After Colony 7, our military leaders decided they needed new tactics, he began. They said the problem was that we were fighting humans in defensive positions. They believed humans would be easier to defeat in open warfare. He made the clicking sound again. They assigned me to hunt down human supply convoys. Quick strikes, fast retreats. No long battles. No time for humans to build their impossible defenses. It seemed like a good plan, said the council leader. All plans seem good until you face humans, Zekthon replied. Our first target was a convoy led by Colonel Ryan Brooks. Intelligence told us it was just supply trucks carrying food and medical equipment. 15 vehicles, maybe 50 human guards. He began pacing again, but slower this time. We had 300 soldiers and air support. The convoy was traveling through open desert with nowhere to hide. It should have been the easiest victory of the war. Was it? Asked the scaled council member. No, Zekthon said simply. It was a massacre, but not the kind our commanders expected. The council members leaned forward in their seats. We attacked at dawn, when the convoy was crossing a flat plain with no cover for kilometers around. Our aircraft hit first, destroying the lead vehicles. Then our ground forces surrounded the remaining trucks. Zekthon stopped pacing and stood very still. That was when we realized the truth. There were no supplies in those trucks. What was in them? Whispered the furry council member. Weapons, armor, combat equipment. The entire convoy was a trap. The silence in the chamber was broken only by the humming of the light crystals. Brooks had somehow learned about our planned attack. Instead of avoiding us or calling for help, he had turned his supply convoy into a mobile weapons platform. Every truck was carrying soldiers and heavy equipment. But you still had superior numbers, protested a council member. Numbers mean nothing to humans, Zekthon replied. Brooks had positioned his vehicles in a pattern that looked random from above. But when our forces closed in, we discovered it was actually a perfect defensive formation. Each truck could support the others. Every vehicle had clear fields of fire. Our forces found themselves caught in a crossfire from all directions, even though we had surrounded the humans. Zekthon's eyes became distant. Within minutes, we had lost half our ground forces. Our air support could not help because Brooks had somehow rigged the trucks with captured anti-aircraft weapons. How did he know you were coming? Asked the council leader. We never found out, Zekthon admitted. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what happened next. He resumed his pacing, but faster now. When Brooks realized he had destroyed most of our forces, he did not retreat. Instead, he contacted our command ship. He contacted you? Yes. Brooks opened a communication channel and spoke directly to our commanding officer. He said he wanted to negotiate. The council members looked confused. That seems reasonable. Brooks offered to let our surviving soldiers surrender to him. The chamber fell silent again. A human colonel, outnumbered 3-1 at the start of the battle, was offering to accept the surrender of our forces, Zekthon said, and our commander agreed. Your commander surrendered to 50 humans? The question came from multiple voices at once. 37 humans, Zekthon corrected. Brooks had lost 13 people in the fighting. But yes, our remaining forces surrendered to them. He stopped pacing and looked directly at the council leader. Do you understand what this means? Brooks did not just win a battle. He turned our own attack into his victory. He made us come to him, then used our strength against us. This was when I first began to understand that humans do not just fight differently. They think differently. Zekthon's voice became quieter. My next assignment was even worse. I was sent to the forest world of Kepler 452b to fight a human unit led by Major Kate Sullivan. Another siege? Asked the tentacled council member. No. Sullivan was conducting what humans call guerrilla warfare. Hit-and-run attacks, small unit tactics. That should have been easier for you. Nothing involving humans is ever easier, Zekthon said. Sullivan had 50 soldiers. We had 3 full divisions. 9,000 troops with full air and orbital support. Surely those odds were in your favor. Sullivan held us off for 8 months. The council members began whispering among themselves again. 8 months, Zekthon repeated. 50 humans against 9,000 aliens, and we could never find them. How is that possible on a forest world? Asked the scaled council member. Because Sullivan did not just hide in the forest. She turned the entire planet into her weapon. Zekthon's mandibles clicked rapidly. In the first month, our troops began getting sick. Not from combat, but from the plants. Sullivan had somehow modified the local vegetation to produce toxins that affected our biology, but not human biology. She modified plants? She did more than that. Sullivan trained the local animals to carry explosives. We would be patrolling through the forest when suddenly a small creature would run into our formation and detonate. The trees themselves became weapons. Sullivan's people had hollowed out massive trunks and turned them into artillery positions. They could fire at us and then disappear into the forest before we could respond. Zekthon's voice became strained. But the worst part was the psychological warfare. Sullivan left recordings hidden throughout the forest. Human voices speaking our language, telling us about our families, our homes, our fears. How could she know such things? We never found out. But hearing human voices in the dark, speaking the names of our offspring, describing our home worlds, it broke the spirits of our soldiers. By the 4th month, our troops were afraid to patrol alone. By the 6th month, they were afraid to patrol in groups. By the 8th month, they were afraid to leave their base camps. The chamber was completely silent now. Sullivan never attacked our main forces directly. She just made the entire planet hostile to our presence. Every tree, every animal, every breath of air became a potential threat. How did it end? Whispered the council leader. Our commanders declared victory and withdrew all forces from the planet, Zekthon said. But it was not a victory. It was a retreat. Sullivan had made 9,000 soldiers afraid of 50 humans. He looked around the room at the horrified alien faces. This is what I mean when I say humans think differently. They do not just use weapons. They use everything. The environment, psychology, even their enemies' own fears become tools in their hands. There is one more thing I must tell you about human tactics, Zekthon continued. I met a human named Technical Sergeant Alex Turner during the battle for Station Omega. He did something that still gives our scientists nightmares. What did he do? Turner captured one of our energy shield generators. These are complex devices that take our engineers years to build and understand. Turner figured out how it worked in 6 hours. The council members stared at him in disbelief. 6 hours, Zekthon repeated, but that was not the worst part. Turner did not just understand our technology. He improved it. Improved it how? He turned our defensive shield into an offensive weapon. Turner modified the generator to create an energy pulse that could disable all electronic equipment within a kilometer radius. Then he used it against us. Zekthon's voice became barely audible. 40 years of Vorthon engineering perfected by a human in 6 hours. Turner not only understood our technology better than we did, he found ways to use it that we had never imagined. This is why human tactics are so terrifying. They do not just adapt to what we do. They take our own tools and use them against us in ways we never thought possible. He looked directly at each council member in turn. Every battle with humans teaches them something new about us. But we never learn anything useful about them because they change their methods every time we meet them. They are not just soldiers. They are problem solvers who happen to be fighting a war. The council chamber remained silent for a long time. Finally, the council leader spoke in a shaky voice. Commander, these tactical abilities are impressive. But surely superior numbers and resources would eventually overcome human innovation. Zekthon laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Honored leader, that is exactly what our high command believed. They decided that the solution was to attack human psychology directly. He turned to look out at the stars again. They thought if they could break human minds, their bodies and tactics would not matter. And did this approach work? Asked the furry council member. Zekthon's reflection in the window showed an expression of pure terror. No, it made everything much worse. Because we learned that human psychology is the most dangerous thing about them. Zekthon stood motionless for a long time, staring out at the stars beyond the great windows. The council members waited in silence, afraid to break the spell of his testimony. When he finally turned back to face them, his expression had changed from fear to something approaching awe. What I have told you so far, he began slowly, represents 5 years of warfare against humanity, 5 years of defeats, surprises, and impossible encounters. By the end, our entire military structure was questioning everything we thought we knew about combat. The council leader leaned forward. But surely your forces had learned enough to develop effective counter-strategies. That is what our high command believed, Zekthon replied. They gathered our best generals, our finest strategic minds, our most advanced technology specialists. The plan was to launch one final overwhelming assault that would end human resistance forever. What happened? The humans offered to negotiate a ceasefire. The silence in the chamber was profound. They offered to negotiate? The question came from several council members at once. Yes. Before our final assault could begin, we received a transmission from General Mary Thompson, the Supreme Commander of Human Military Forces. She requested a meeting to discuss terms for ending the conflict. Zekthon began pacing again. But his movements were different now, less agitated, more thoughtful. Our leaders were suspicious. After 5 years of impossible human behavior, they assumed this was another trap. They sent me as part of a small delegation to meet with Thompson, expecting it to be an ambush. Was it an ambush? No. Thompson met us on a neutral station with only a small honor guard. She was completely open about her intentions. Zekthon stopped pacing and looked directly at the council leader. Thompson told us that humanity was prepared to end the war immediately. Not because they were losing, but because they had decided that continuing the conflict served no useful purpose. She was admitting defeat? No, Zekthon said firmly. Thompson was offering us mercy. The council members looked confused. I do not understand, said the tentacled member. Thompson explained that human military analysts had been studying our forces throughout the conflict. They had identified 17 different ways to completely destroy our homeworlds without risking a single human life. The chamber fell completely silent. 17 ways? Whispered the furry council member. That was just the beginning, Zekthon continued. Thompson told us that human scientists had developed 43 different methods for eliminating all life in the galaxy. Not just our species, but all species. 43 methods for what? Complete galactic extinction, Zekthon said. Thompson described weapons that could collapse stars, technologies that could poison entire solar systems, devices that could tear apart the fabric of space itself. He resumed his pacing, but slower now. She explained these capabilities in detail, not to threaten us, but to help us understand our situation. Our situation? Thompson told us that humans had possessed these capabilities for most of the war. They could have ended the conflict at any time by simply destroying our civilization. Zekthon's voice became very quiet, but they chose not to. Why? The question came from multiple voices. Because humans believe that total victory without challenge makes them weaker. The council members stared at him in incomprehension. Thompson explained that humans fight wars not just to win, but to learn. Every battle teaches them something new about themselves, their enemies, and the nature of conflict itself. She told us that our resistance had been valuable to them. Fighting us had helped humans develop new tactics, test new technologies, and train their soldiers in ways that peaceful exercises could not. Zekthon stopped pacing and faced the council directly. Thompson thanked us for providing such excellent training opportunities. Training opportunities? The council leader's voice was barely audible. Yes. From the human perspective, our entire war had been an extended military exercise. They had been learning from us while allowing us to believe we had a chance of victory. But why offer a ceasefire now? Because Thompson said their analysis indicated that we had taught them everything useful we could teach them. Continuing the war would just be repetition. Zekthon's mandibles clicked rapidly. She also said that humans had developed an emotional attachment to our species during the conflict. They respected our determination and tactical abilities. They did not want to exterminate us unnecessarily. Emotional attachment. Humans apparently form bonds with worthy opponents. Thompson said that several human commanders had requested that our species be preserved because they found us. Interesting. The chamber was silent for several minutes. Thompson offered us a simple choice, Zekthon continued. We could accept a ceasefire and maintain our territorial integrity, or the humans would demonstrate one of their 17 civilization-ending techniques. She gave us 6 hours to decide. What did your leaders choose? They chose the ceasefire, Zekthon said, but not because they believed Thompson was bluffing. Why then? Because during our meeting, Thompson casually mentioned that humans had already tested their galactic extinction methods on uninhabited star systems. Zekthon's voice became strained. She showed us recordings of entire solar systems being disassembled by human technology, stars being extinguished like candles, planets being converted into raw materials for human construction projects. The recordings were not threats. They were documentation. Humans had been testing these weapons throughout our war, just in case they needed them. But they never used them. Thompson said they saw no reason to use such methods unless all other options were exhausted. She explained that humans prefer to solve problems with minimal force whenever possible. Zekthon turned to look out the windows again. That is when I finally understood what we had been fighting. What had you been fighting? A species that could have destroyed us at any moment, but chose instead to let us live because they found us entertaining. The silence stretched for several minutes. This is why I am here today, Zekthon said, turning back to the council. Not to report on human military capabilities, not to analyze their tactics or technology. I am here to warn you about what humans really are. And what are they? Humans are a species that has solved the problem of total power. The council members looked at each other in confusion. Most species become corrupted by absolute capability, Zekthon explained. When beings can destroy anything, they usually do. When civilizations can conquer everything, they typically try. But humans have developed something unique in the galaxy. They have the ability to choose restraint despite having unlimited power. They could rule the galaxy tomorrow if they wanted to. They could eliminate any species that annoys them. They could reshape entire star systems to suit their preferences. Instead, they choose to coexist. They choose to negotiate. They choose to show mercy to species that attacked them. Zekthon's voice became very quiet. Do you understand how terrifying this is? Terrifying? Asked the council leader. It means that every interaction with humans is entirely dependent on their goodwill. They do not negotiate because they have to. They do not show mercy because they are weak. They do not coexist because they lack alternatives. They do these things because they choose to, and that choice can change at any moment. The chamber fell silent. Again, Thompson told me something else during our final meeting, Zekathon continued. She said that humans were curious about other galactic civilizations. They wanted to learn about different cultures, different perspectives, different approaches to existence. She said humans were hoping to find species that could teach them new things. That sounds positive, said the furry council member. Hopefully, Thompson also mentioned that humans become bored easily if they decide that other species have nothing interesting to offer them. Zekthon did not finish the sentence. What happens then? Thompson did not say, but she smiled when she mentioned it, and I have learned that human smiles can be the most terrifying thing in the galaxy. Zekthon looked around the chamber at each council member in turn. This is my warning to you all. The ceasefire with humanity is not our victory. It is their gift to us. We exist at their pleasure. We maintain our civilizations because they find us amusing. We keep our territories because they have not decided they want them. And someday they might change their minds. What do you recommend we do? Asked the council leader. Be interesting, Zekthon said simply. Be useful. Be worthy of their continued attention. Because the alternative is not conquest or subjugation. The alternative is irrelevance. And irrelevant things do not hold human attention for very long. Zekthon walked toward the chamber's exit, then paused and turned back one final time. There is one more thing you should know about humans, he said. Thompson told me that their military analysts have been studying all of our species throughout this conflict. They have detailed plans for dealing with each of your civilizations. Plans for what? She did not specify. But Thompson did mention that humans find some galactic species more interesting than others, and she said that interesting species tend to have longer futures. With that, Zekthon left the chamber, leaving 12 alien civilizations to contemplate their place in a galaxy where humanity had quietly become the ultimate